You're a foreign entrepreneur, you're a foreign investor, and you're thinking about whether or not you should become an American citizen because you already have a US business, you already have US clients, and you're asking yourself, is this the right move? Is this strategic? Should I become an American citizen to further my business? Yes? No? Well, it's up to you to answer that, but in this video, I'm here to tell you what type of elements you should take into consideration from a tax perspective should you decide to move forward with your US citizenship application and ultimately naturalize as an American citizen. Hello there, this is Javier Correa. I'm the tax director here at the Rothbard Group, and I'm a licensed enrolled agent in the United States of America, fully admitted to practice before the Internal Revenue Service. Now, many of my clients and many of Rothbard clients come to us and they say, listen, I have a US LLC, I have a US business, I travel to the US a lot, I have US banking, I absolutely love the United States of America. Like, honestly, I have an apartment in New York, I have a beach house in Miami, 80% of my sales come from the United States, maybe I do Amazon FBA, I do drop shipping, maybe I'm an online consultant, you know, all these kinds of things. Those are the things that our clients are telling us, and they're asking us point blank, should I become a US citizen and move to the United States to further my business interests in the US? Because what they hear from the immigration perspective is, hey, US citizenship is the ultimate goal. You should aim to become a US citizen. You should upgrade that B1, B2 visa or that E2 visa to a green card, and then you should upgrade that green card to a US passport. That is the way it goes. And I often tell my immigration colleagues, hey, what you're saying is correct from an immigration perspective, and doubtless it is true that if you're planning to live full-time in the US and you want your life to be centered completely around the United States, then obviously US citizenship is something strategic. If you're looking for a job in the US, if you're ultimately looking for government contracts in the US, all that is completely true, and US citizenship does open up a lot of doors if you're operating 1000% domestically in the United States. But then when clients come to me and they ask me, what happens from a tax perspective, I often tell them, hey, listen, take into consideration the following elements before you make your decision. Now, I do want to point out that the decision of whether or not to request US citizenship and to naturalize is something fully personal, and all we're doing here is providing tax information so that you can make an informed decision. So let's take a look at this from the US perspective. We are quite famous for helping clients structure businesses that operate through US LLCs, with US banking, with US payment processing, with US clients, but ultimately pay very low, or even in some cases, in many cases, zero US tax. Because remember, as a non-resident alien holding even a non-immigrant visa like a B1, B2, or an E2 or an L1A visa, you are only subject to US tax on US source income. Now, the key thing to be a non-resident alien, as I've said in some of my other videos, is number one, you cannot be a US citizen. Number two, you cannot have a green card. Number three, you cannot live full-time in the US to the point where you're spending so many days in the US that you trigger the substantial presence test and become a US tax resident by virtue of time spent in the United States. So as long as you avoid those three factors, you remain a non-resident alien. Being a non-resident alien means tax-free US LLCs, tax-free US trusts. It means tax-free investments on the New York Stock Exchange. It means global banking with much greater ease because you don't have to tell any foreign bank that you are an American. The moment you become an American citizen, that all changes. No more tax-free US LLCs. No more tax-free US trusts. No more enhanced privacy through US banks. Because, of course, US banks are not part of CRS, the Common Reporting Standards, which is what helps keep your accounts private when you're a non-resident alien. But you, as an American citizen, are now fully part of FATCA. You are having bank accounts in the same place where you are tax resident, and ultimately the benefit of that sought-after US privacy is no longer there. In addition to that, now you also have a very aggressive system that follows you wherever you go. Many people are not aware of the fact that American citizens are tax residents of the US regardless of where they live. So if you're a foreign entrepreneur investor asking yourself whether or not you should naturalize as an American citizen, think about it. Do you have businesses in your home country? Do you have bank accounts in your home country? Do you have any global business interests that are not American? Because that's going to become much more difficult to manage. You're going to have to deal with American-controlled foreign corporation rules, which are quite difficult and apply to all kinds of businesses, not only passive holding companies. You're going to have American PFIC rules, which are rules designed to create a punitive taxation, essentially, system for certain foreign companies that hold passive investments, even if they're not controlled by American citizens. You're going to have to fill out FBARs to report your bank accounts around the world, even if those are bank accounts that were opened before you became an American citizen, and even if those are bank accounts that are in your home country. Let's say you're Italian American after you naturalize and you just keep an Italian bank account for your daily expenses in Italy or to pay your electric bill for your apartment in Rome. That is going to be most likely reportable if you're the kind of client that we work with. So basically any kind of joint balance that goes to $10,000 or more in foreign bank accounts becomes reportable. So you do have to keep all of this in mind. Furthermore, you have to take into consideration that while it is possible to bank internationally as an American, meaning that I cannot lie to you and say, oh, you can no longer bank in Switzerland, you can no longer bank in Singapore, you can no longer bank in Panama if you're an American, you have to understand that because there's this global tax exposure associated to American citizens, first of all, fewer banks will be willing to take you, and the banks that will be willing to onboard you will likely require a higher minimum balance because you're a higher compliance risk. Also, you have to take into consideration that if you have a global business empire and you have entities that are outside the US, like I described before, and you're the director, the manager, and the main shareholder of those entities, when you want to open a bank account outside the US, the same thing will apply. They're going to look at the business, they're going to say, okay, maybe the business is non-US, but there is a key controlling US interest, you are a US citizen, so it's going to make the account opening process more difficult. We've seen this with certain American clients who open Panamanian corporations through the Rothbard group, for example. They ultimately do get their bank accounts, but the process is slower. They require more documentation. They want to see more compliance. So ultimately, from a compliance and tax perspective, your life is going to become more complicated as an American citizen than if you just stay as a non-resident alien. Now, you will tell me, well, Javier, what if I just want to go all into the United States? What are the strategic advantages of U.S. citizenship in the U.S.? Well, I outlined them before. If you're looking for a high-paying job in the U.S., go for U.S. citizenship. If you are looking for certain specific industries, you want to invest in those, and those industries rely on government contracts, then U.S. citizenship might be strategic. But other than those very specific scenarios, you have to keep in mind that everything we've talked about on this channel, and I want to go through it again, tax-free U.S. LLCs, privacy-enhanced banking in the U.S., tax-free U.S. trusts, selling U.S. stocks free of U.S. capital gains tax, all of that automatically goes away the moment you become an American citizen. So, the question you have to ask yourself is this worth it? Is the additional tax burden, the additional tax compliance, and is having U.S. tax residence, regardless of where I live in the world, regardless of where I decide to reside, regardless of where my family is, regardless of where my business operations are, worth it? And just to clarify, keep in mind, this is no longer the 1950s. You can run a very successful U.S. exposed business, U.S. facing business, without being a U.S. citizen and without being a green card holder. In fact, we help clients do that all the time here at the Rothbard Group. Lastly, I do want to mention one thing that is very important. Let's say that you are a U.S. citizen, you've naturalized, and you have now only realized everything I'm telling you is true. You are now saying, wow, nobody told me this. My immigration lawyer told me to go for citizenship. Now I'm a U.S. citizen. But wow, yeah, I have all these things you're saying, Javier. And, frankly, I potentially may regret my decision. What can I do? Well, the only thing you can do from a tax perspective, really, is renounce your citizenship, which is something that we do not encourage necessarily here at the Rothbard Group. It's a very personal decision, and we do not say it's something good or bad. It just depends on whatever that person wants to do. However, if you decide to move forward and entertain the idea of renouncing American citizenship, you do have to take into consideration that it's not something that is easy to do. It's not something that you just go into an embassy, you renounce, and nothing happens from a tax perspective. If you're a high net worth individual, if you have a net worth that is at $2 million or more, if you've paid a certain amount in taxes on average for the past 5 years, if you, by any chance, have been an American citizen and you just were not aware of all this tax compliance and you lived globally and you did not file the forms and you did not report the income and you did not behave as if you were a U.S. tax resident, which is part of the deal when you become a U.S. citizen, you will be considered a covered expat. And when you're a covered expat and you renounce U.S. citizenship as a covered expatriate, you're going to trigger a deemed disposition tax on your global assets above a certain threshold, which means that even if you do not sell the apartment in Rome, the shares of the family business in Switzerland, the beach house in Cancun, all those assets are going to trigger deemed disposition as if you had sold them, and you have to pay the US government capital gains tax before they actually let you go. And if that weren't bad enough, if you renounce solely for tax avoidance purposes, you will be deemed inadmissible to the United States of America, even if you have a strong passport. So even if you renounce US citizenship and you retain your original citizenship only, and that citizenship is, let's say, Swiss or Canadian, for example, you will still have difficulties getting back into the United States, most likely. So this is not a decision that you can make lightly. This is a decision that requires close pondering and that requires careful observation and that requires deep analysis into whether or not it is something that you should strategically consider and something that will really help you achieve your goals. I just want to help you make an informed decision, which is what the Rothbard Group does for all of its clients. Do you have this US exposed business, this US facing business, and have you asked yourself if you should get US citizenship or not, and you want to talk to a professional to understand in your specific case what would the consequences of obtaining US citizenship be? Then we're ready to work with you. Rothbardgroup.com. I'll work with you myself, and we're eager to listen to your case. Thank you. This was Javier Correa, Tax Director at the Rothbard Group.